So there's been quite a bit of news recently about some problems, some sexual scandals within certain schools of Buddhism recently. And what I would like to do is to go back to some of the earlier texts and to look at ways that they might inform us as to what are potential problems here and what might be the root of some of these difficulties that we're having nowadays. So we'll look at all that and again, some solutions coming right up. So I'm Doug Smith. I'm study director at the Secular Buddhist Association. That's secularbuddhism.org. If you're new to the channel and interested in living a wiser and a kinder and a less stress-filled life, consider subscribing. So there's been quite a bit of news about difficulties within certain groups, sanghas, Buddhist sanghas. Perhaps the most big, the biggest has been in Shambhala, where there's been a number of sexual scandals that have sort of overtaken things over there. There's also been some teachers who have behaved badly, who are not within that organization. My friend Justin Whitaker, who has a wonderful blog that I highly recommend on Buddhism in America, has been chronicling the problems, in particular in Shambhala, and I'll put a link to one of his more recent blog posts down below if you're interested in reading more about that. Also, Brad Warner over in Hardcore Zen has a good video, a YouTube video, about some of the problems that he sees within one other particular group, but also Brad Warner comes up with sort of a psychological interpretation of why he thinks some gurus don't behave so well, having to do with their own sort of not really being ready for the kind of fame and impact they're liable to have once they become big. And once they become big, therefore, they're sort of thrust into a different kind of environment. So Brad has a number of very interesting and good things to say, so I'll put a link to his video, his YouTube video up above, in case you want to watch what he has to say. But my take is going to be a little bit different. Not that I disagree with him. I just think there are other issues we can also get into. So I think my general take would be that there are two main problems that come up again and again within Buddhist context, but within any kind of context that has to do with faith traditions or wisdom traditions. The first of those would be placing too much faith or confidence in particular gurus or teachers. That's number one. And that's, I think, a very deep problem, and it's a problem that's deep in humanity, that I think there's something within us that makes us want to do that, to place an enormous amount of trust in somebody who's in a position of power or knowledge, or who has a deep experience with something. And that can go wrong, though. That can go off the rails, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And the second problem, which can be related or not, but it certainly makes the first one worse, is the problem of secret teachings. Is the problem of keeping certain kinds of teachings out of the public eye, of not discussing them publicly, of not sort of airing them in a broader audience, but keeping them secret, in particular, as a transmission between a particular teacher and a particular student, and not allowing it outside of that context. Now, of course, we all know that teachers have to be teaching to the students. So there are some teachers, there's a very famous line from Ajahn Chah, who was asked, it looks like you're teaching different things to different people. And Ajahn Chah said, yes, if we're all trying to walk down this road, and if somebody's straying off to the right, I'll tell them to go left. And if somebody's straying off to the left, I'm going to tell them to go right. So I'm not talking to everybody when I'm saying those things. And so we have to remember that, of course, every teaching is given, or if it's done by a competent teacher, will be given to a particular student at a particular place along the path. That's one thing. Another thing, though, is to say that the teaching has to be secret. Ajahn Chah wasn't doing this stuff in secret. He was doing it in open. He was just giving sort of different instructions to different people. So I want to talk about that as well. So, but to begin with, placing too much confidence in your teacher or in your guru. And as a matter of fact, there's a very, I think, wise and interesting passage within the Anguttara Nikaya of 5 drawbacks of placing too much confidence in a person or a teacher. And so the Buddha goes through 5 drawbacks, 5 problems that can arise if you place too much confidence in a particular person. And I think what he means is within the context of being your teacher, your guru, somebody who's going to be leading you on the path. And the first of those 5 is that the person you're placing confidence in may be censured by the Sangha and may be asked to leave, basically. This happens. They can do bad things, basically. I mean, and this is what we've seen within these Sanghas recently, is individuals, teachers, people of power, who basically are asked by their Sangha to leave or to cease teaching because they have abused their power in some way. So that's the first drawback, is that they can be asked to basically leave or stop teaching, or not to do what they've been doing. The second possible drawback of placing too much confidence in an individual is that the Sangha can basically ask them to stay at the end of the line, can reduce them in rank within the Sangha. Now, this is something that may not happen in many Sanghas nowadays, but it certainly did in the Buddha's day, and I believe it does to this day in Theravadan Sanghas. The Sangha can ask them, can basically demote them within the Sangha to be of a lesser stature than they had been before. Stature is usually given by your seniority, how long you've been a monastic, but that can be one way of punishing a monastic can be to make them go at the end of the line, to be the last in the line who gets served in the morning. And of course, if your teacher, the person you look up to, is all of a sudden getting served after you, that can be something of a shock. The third problem is that your teacher, this person you look up to, can depart, can go and leave for some other region. And we know that happens nowadays as well, where a teacher that maybe was local to you has decided to move off somewhere, has decided to move halfway around the world, whether it's for a week or a month or a year or the rest of their lives. So that can also be a problem. Another problem is that your teacher can disrobe. That would be number 4. Your teacher can decide, this isn't really for me, can decide to stop practicing Buddhism or practicing whatever it is that you happen to be learning from them. Certainly this does happen. And if it does, then you're up a creek, as they say. You've lost your teacher, and in fact, your teacher has decided that he doesn't want to teach what you're learning from him anymore, or her. So that's a problem. And fifth and last, of course, your teacher can die. Because teachers, as we know everyone dies eventually. And if so, and this is something that, of course, was a big deal in the early Sangha, because, as we know, the Buddha eventually did pass away, and it was something of a big shock for the Sangha, in the sense that a lot of stuff had to be done after his death in order to preserve the teachings. And in each of the cases of these 5 drawbacks, the Buddha says that this is what can happen is that you lose confidence in your teacher. Because either they've behaved badly, or they've left, or they've disrobed, or they've died, you can lose confidence in them. And as a result, you can decide not to go to teachers anymore. And if you decide not to go to any other teachers, because you've placed so much confidence in this one, and your confidence has been broken, you may decide not to go to any other ones. And so you stop listening to wisdom, you stop listening to the Dharma, you stop listening to wise teachings, and as a result, you start behaving in ways that are unwise, in ways that are unskillful. And so you can see a kind of a degradation here that happens if you place too much confidence in a particular individual. And what is the antidote here? And I'll get to that at the very end. Now, the second point having to do with the secrecy of the teachings. And I think whenever we hear that a teaching is secret, I think we have to ask a couple of questions. The first question is, why is this being kept secret? What's the reason? Who is it being kept secret from? What are the people afraid of who are keeping these teachings secret? What are they afraid of will happen if the teaching becomes widely known? Are they afraid that they will be censured for those teachings? Are they afraid that those teachings would be misused? Why would they be misused? I mean, what is the misuse? Is there a way of teaching the same kind of thing without using a teaching that can be misused? I mentioned that the Buddha passed on, of course. It was a big deal for his Sangha. The last sutta that was written, or that was composed before he died, seems to be one of the most replete or full of human details about the Buddha, is called the Mahapanibbana Sutta. since he died soon after the events in it, and after that, the Sangha had to get together into their first council in order to revise the Buddha's teachings, my expectation is that this material here was very close to their minds when they came together. As a result, it's as I say, it's full of really interesting detail about the Buddha's last days and the kinds of concerns that he had. And so one of the things that the Buddha did say before passing on is that I've taught the Dhamma without making any distinction between secret and public. The Tathagata, that is the Buddha, doesn't have the closed fist of a teacher when it comes to the Dhamma. And when I cite that, it's not to say that the teachings one finds in early Buddhism are somehow the law, or they're somehow real Buddhism, or they're somehow ones that we have to be fundamentalist about, because I don't believe that's the case. What I do believe is that we should at least contrast and consider the distinction between the openness that the Buddha showed, where he says that he doesn't teach with a closed fist, he everything is out on the table, everything is clear, he hasn't been holding anything back, with the attitude of some teachers that certain teachings are secret. And we should contrast that, I think, also with something the Buddha does say, which is in another sutta, that the potential teachings are like the leaves of the trees of the forest. The actual teachings that he's given us in his teaching and his oral recitations are like a handful of leaves. Here we might say, oh well, but there's so much more to be taught. But the Buddha says the distinction between that handful and the forest is that the handful of leaves are what's really important for us to know. The material in the forest, well, it might be true, but it just isn't as important to our reaching the goal that we want to reach. And I expect that also the Buddha made this kind of claim near the end of his life because there were probably some teachers around at the time who did have secret teaching, so they would only give to certain of their students. I expect that this is a good deal of what happened in Brahmanism at the time, was that you had some teachings that were public and some teachings that were really restricted to the Brahmins, and in particular to the relation between the father and the son, as he would give the information to the son about whatever the particular ritual was. And the Buddha clearly did not believe that that was really the right way to go. He believed that the information should be public. And in that way, of course, we know that when information is public, it becomes debated. It becomes the sort of thing that we can discuss and debate with other people who are friends of ours. We can debate it with people who disagree with us. And that way we can sort of hone and work this material in a spirit of open consideration and inquiry. If material is kept secret, it may be the sort of thing that can curdle, can go bad, because without that kind of external inquiry, a good deal of mischief can be done before anybody knows about it. So in the early texts we find both the attitude that one should be careful about putting too much faith or confidence in a particular individual, and that the teachings are open, not secret, that they're not taught with a closed fist but with an open hand. And I said I was going to give a potential solution to the first problem of not putting too much confidence in a teacher, a guru, an individual, a person. We can think of the problem having to do with people putting too much faith and confidence in the Buddha. When the Buddha died, many would then leave. And this is one of the reasons why the Buddha was concerned with this, is he didn't want the movement of the Dhamma that he had taught to die after he died. And as a result, during the Mahapariনিbbāna Sutta as well, we've just looked at that in a different part of the sutta, the Buddha says, have two refuges. You should have two refuges. You should have your own, the refuge being yourself, and your refuge being the Dhamma. You should keep yourself as an island, keep the Dhamma as an island. And I talked about this in a different video, which I'll put a link to up above if you're interested in hearing more about that, because I think that is a crucial teaching of the Buddha late on in his life, when he was realizing, I think, the potential pitfalls of having people with too much faith in him or too much confidence in him as a person. Have confidence in yourself. Have confidence in your own ability to see things that are ethical from things that are unethical. And don't let somebody in the guise of a guru pull you away from wisdom that is clear to you, pull you away from things that are beneficial and are praised by the wise, towards things that the guru may think are good, but you may seem to you to be problematic. And to do that under the guise of secrecy is, I think, even to compound the problem more. Let me know if any of you guys have had experiences with these problematic gurus, the ones either that were mentioned at the beginning in these videos or in Shambhala that I mentioned, or if you know people who have, because I think that would be interesting for us to know about. If you have any further thoughts about these, some of the potential problems or some of the potential solutions, I'd also be interested to know. I think this is kind of a dialogue that we must have, because it's not only a religious issue. There have been sexual problems within secular organizations as well. I mean, in secular Buddhism, I don't know, but certainly if it gets large enough, we're going to have some bad actors. There always are some bad actors. And the problem is not to expect there never to be bad actors, because humans being humans, they're prone to greed, hatred, and ignorance. The problem is trying to come up with a way of combating this, a strategy that both students can take to it so that they become less likely to be victimized, and that organizations can take so that when problems happen, as they inevitably will, they're dealt with in a relatively fast and efficient manner so that fewer people have to be affected by it. So if these discussions interest you, consider subscribing. Check out my Patreon page. It's linked down below if you want to support the channel, because and thanks so much for those of you who do, because it makes a big difference to me. To be able to help support the financial issues that come up in any kind of a YouTube program. And meanwhile, thanks for your questions and your comments. Thanks so much for watching. It's a wonderful, wonderful audience that I have. And it makes me happy every time to read everything that appears on the page, because so much of it is useful to me, and I think to other people who read them. So thanks again, and we'll catch you on the next video. All of you, be well.